a summer morning in Idaho, a mother waved goodbye as her daughter left with the family dog for a quick walk. Little did she know it would be the last time she'd see either of them. Despite extensive police searches and volunteer efforts, no traces were found, and the case grew colder as time passed. But 12 months later, everything changed when a hunter, using thermal imaging to track elk in the forest, caught a strange heat signature on his drone. What followed would unravel a story no one could have anticipated. The sharp chime of the doorbell cut through the early morning stillness like a knife. Marissa Ewing pulled her robe tighter around her as she walked toward the door, her bare feet cold against the hardwood floor. Through the peephole, she saw Detective Marcus Holbrook standing outside, his breath visible in the crisp Idaho air. Her heart sank. After a year of waiting for answers, every unexpected visit from law enforcement carried the weight of a finality she feared. "Detective Holbrook," she said, opening the door, her voice trembling. "Have you found something?" "Mrs. Ewing, may I come in? I have news about your daughter's case." Without a word, she stepped aside, leading him into the living room, where Adrian's school photo still took center stage on the mantel. The detective's face was unreadable as he sat down across from her. "Early this morning, we got a call from a hunter named Dale Morrison," Detective Holbrook began. He showed her his tablet. He was using a thermal drone to track elk in the Coeur d'Alene National Forest when his equipment picked up an unusual heat signature. Marissa's heart raced. What kind of heat signature? At first, he thought it was a coyote, but when he moved the drone closer, it became clear, Holbrook said, turning the tablet toward her. The thermal footage showed the shape of a medium-sized dog, clearly identifiable as a golden retriever. Marissa's world tilted. "Buddy?" "We believe so. The hunter contacted us immediately, and we dispatched a team." "But he's been missing for over a year. How is he still alive?" Detective Holbrook's voice was steady. "He's at the Northern Idaho Emergency Veterinary Clinic on Highway 95. He's alive, Mrs. Ewing, and from what the rescue team reported, he's been cared for." Marissa's mind raced. "Cared for? What do you mean?" "We think it's best if you see for yourself," Holbrook said quietly. "I can drive you there now." 20 minutes later, they arrived at the veterinary clinic. Marissa barely waited for the detective to park before rushing inside. The receptionist, recognizing the urgency in her face, immediately led them to an examination room. Dr. Sarah Chen, a woman with kind eyes, was bent over the golden retriever. Even after a year, Marissa recognized him immediately. It was Buddy, though thinner and with a matted coat, but unmistakably her dog. "Mrs. Ewing," Dr. Chen said softly, stepping aside. "He's sedated right now to keep him calm while we examine him, but he's going to be okay." Marissa reached out, her hands shaking, to touch Buddy's fur. He was warm, breathing, alive. "How?" she whispered. Dr. Chen's face was puzzled. "That's what's remarkable. Despite his trauma, Buddy shows clear signs of regular feeding over the past year. When we pumped his stomach, we found dry dog food, likely from the last 12 hours. His body condition is actually better than expected." "Someone's been keeping him alive," Detective Holbrook said quietly. "But the question is, who and why?" Marissa's fingers found the rope burns on Buddy's neck, still fresh. These marks, were they from being tied to a tree? "Yes," Dr. Chen said, pointing to Buddy's collar. "But look here, this isn't the collar he had when he disappeared, is it?" Marissa stared at the blue collar, plain and tagless. "No, he had a red leather collar with his tags, his name, our address, my phone number. This is different." "Someone changed it," Holbrook noted. "Someone who didn't want him identified. But why keep him alive?" Marissa's voice broke. "If they took Adrian, why feed her dog? Why tie him up where he could be found?" Holbrook's jaw tightened. Those are the questions we intend to answer. Search teams are already heading to the area where Buddy was found. If Adrienne's out there, we'll find her. Dr. Chen gently stroked Buddy's head. He's been through a lot, but he's a fighter. I'd like to keep him here for observation for at least 24 hours, run some more tests. But physically, he's going to recover. Marissa nodded, her gaze fixed on Buddy, the dog who had once been her daughter's constant companion. Buddy had been Adrienne's 16th birthday present just 2 years ago, and they had been inseparable, taking their Saturday morning walks without fail, until that fateful morning last July when neither of them came back. Mrs. Ewing. Detective Holbrook's voice broke through her thoughts. This is the strongest lead we've had. Someone kept this dog alive for a reason. That someone knows what happened to Adrienne. Standing in that sterile examination room, watching Buddy's chest rise and fall with each sedated breath, Marissa allowed herself to feel something she hadn't allowed in months. Hope. It was fragile. A terrifying hope, but it was there. The possibility that somewhere, someone had kept her daughter as alive as they had kept Buddy. The phone rang just as Marissa pulled into her driveway after leaving the clinic. She had spent the last hour with Buddy, trying to process the morning's revelations. Seeing Principal Janet Morrison's name on the caller ID, Marissa answered quickly. "Marissa, I just heard the news." Principal Morrison's voice was breathless with urgency. "About Adrienne's dog being found. The entire Lakeland High community wants to help. We're organizing volunteer search parties to sweep the forest area where Buddy was discovered. We're hoping to find any trace of Adrienne." Marissa's voice caught. "Janet, thank you. We'll be there within the hour," Principal Morrison assured her. "Several teachers are already on their way to your house to coordinate. We're not wasting any time. Adrienne is one of ours, and we're going to bring her home." Within 30 minutes, Marissa's quiet suburban home had transformed into a bustling command center. Cars lined the street as teachers, staff, and parent volunteers arrived, armed with maps, first aid kits, and walkie-talkies. Her kitchen table was covered with topographical maps of the Coeur d'Alene National Forest, and someone had set up a coffee station on the counter. Jim Rodriguez, the school's head football coach, who was coordinating the search, stood at the head of the table with a laser pointer. "All right, everyone, listen up. We're going to divide into teams of 6. Each team will be assigned a grid section radiating out from where Buddy was found." He pointed to a red X on the map. "This is approximately 15 miles northeast of town, near Bunko Road. The terrain is rough, so be prepared." As Marissa scanned the crowd, she noticed Tobias Chandler, Adrienne's AP biology teacher. Unlike the others, who were dressed for a hike in casual clothes, Mr. Chandler wore brand new technical gear, moisture-wicking shirts, convertible pants, and high-end hiking boots. He approached her with a sympathetic expression. "I want you to know how deeply this has affected all of us at school. Adrienne is such a special student." "Thank you, Mr. Chandler. She always enjoyed your class," Marissa replied, surprised by how emotional she felt. His eyes brightened slightly, as though proud. "She was incredibly dedicated to her studies. I remember her staying after class just last year, asking about pre-med programs. She said the University of Washington was her dream school, but she worried her grades might not be competitive enough. I assured her that with her work ethic and natural intelligence, she had nothing to worry about." He paused, his tone shifting. "She also mentioned feeling pressure to succeed, especially after your family's recent changes." Marissa stiffened slightly, the mention of her divorce making her uneasy. She hadn't realized Adrienne had confided so much to her teachers about personal matters. "I'd like to volunteer to lead Search Team C," Mr. Chandler said, pulling a handheld GPS unit from his backpack. "I'll take the Eastern Quadrant. I've been researching search and rescue protocols extensively and brought emergency supplies, flares, emergency blankets, water purification tablets." Coach Rodriguez looked impressed. "That's thorough, Tobias. We appreciate the initiative." Mr. Chandler spread out a detailed map, highlighting the eastern section. It has several ravines and dense undergrowth. It requires someone with hiking experience to navigate safely. Marissa moved closer to the table, her curiosity piqued. "Where would you like me?" Mr. Chandler looked up quickly. "Oh, I think you should join Team A heading north," he suggested. "The terrain there is more manageable, mostly established trails. The eastern route I'll be taking is quite challenging. Steep grades, loose rocks. We wouldn't want you getting injured when Adrienne needs you to be strong." Something about the way he steered her away from his search area made Marissa pause, but Coach Rodriguez was already nodding in agreement. "He's right. Team A will be a better fit for you. We'll cover the northern section, where the old logging roads make for easier terrain." As the teams formed and began preparing, Marissa watched Mr. Chandler organize his group with remarkable efficiency. He handed out supplies and gave what sounded like a well-practiced safety briefing. For a high school science teacher, he seemed unusually prepared, almost as if he had been planning for this moment. "We'll find her, Mrs. Ewing," he said softly as he passed by her on his way out, his hand briefly resting on her shoulder. "I promise we'll search every inch of that forest. Adrienne deserves to come home." Before the teams left, there was a brief lull as volunteers gathered their gear and finalized transportation plans. Marissa found herself sitting at the kitchen table with Mr. Chandler and a few other teachers, reviewing the search grid one last time. Mr. Chandler had moved his chair close to hers, pointing out landmarks on his detailed map. "You know, Mrs. Ewing," he said, his voice lowering as if he were confiding in her, "I've been thinking about all my conversations with Adrienne over the past year. There might be places she mentioned that could help narrow our search." Marissa's ears perked up. "What kind of conversations?" she asked, grateful for any lead. "Well," he said, leaning back in his chair, "she often talked about her college goals during our sessions. She was really anxious about getting into a good pre-med program." His expression became thoughtful. "She specifically mentioned her fear of disappointing you, especially after your husband left 3 years ago. She felt like she had to be perfect to make up for all the upheaval." Marissa's breath caught in her throat. The divorce had been finalized 3 years ago, but Adrienne had always been so stoic about it. She'd never expressed those feelings to Marissa directly. "She told you that?" Marissa asked, her voice tight. "Oh yes," Mr. Chandler nodded, his eyes softening. "We talked quite a bit about it. Her perfectionism was really weighing on her. She'd say things like, 'Mom's been through so much, I can't let her down,' and 'What if I'm not smart enough for medical school?' She was putting a tremendous amount of pressure on herself." Mrs. Patterson, the English teacher, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "I didn't realize Adrienne was struggling that much. She always seemed so confident in class." "She opened up during our tutoring sessions," Mr. Chandler explained. "One-on-one environments tend to make students feel more comfortable sharing their concerns." "I'm so grateful for those tutoring sessions," Marissa said, touching his arm briefly. "Adrienne's biology grades improved so much, from B's to A's. Those Monday and Wednesday sessions really made a difference." Mr. Chandler's expression flickered slightly before he smiled. "Actually, we met on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I remember specifically because those were my designated tutoring days." Marissa frowned. "No, I'm certain it was Mondays and Wednesdays. Those were my late shifts at the hospital. I remember because I'd leave dinner in the fridge for her on those nights." "Memory can be tricky during stressful times," Mr. Chandler said smoothly. "But I'm quite certain it was Tuesdays and Thursdays. Adrienne preferred studying in the science prep room rather than the library because it was quieter, more private for concentrated learning." "The prep room?" Coach Rodriguez interjected. "Isn't that usually off limits to students?" "I made an exception for dedicated students like Adrienne," Mr. Chandler replied. "She actually helped me organize supplies while we reviewed material. Kinesthetic learning, you know. It helped her retain information better." His voice took on an almost nostalgic quality. She earned quite a bit of extra credit by staying after school to help prepare lab experiments. Such a dedicated young woman. Marissa felt a strange unease creeping up her spine. The way Mr. Chandler spoke about these private sessions, his detailed knowledge of Adrian's inner thoughts, seemed beyond what a typical teacher-student relationship would involve. How often did these prep room sessions happen? Marissa asked carefully. Oh, quite regularly, he said. Sometimes she'd stay until 5 or 6 in the evening, especially when we were preparing for big exams. She was determined to maintain her A average. He smiled, but something in his eyes made Marissa's skin prickle. I told her that with her natural intelligence and my guidance, she could achieve anything she set her mind to. Just then, Mr. Chandler's phone buzzed on the table with an incoming text. Before he could reach for it, Marissa caught a glimpse of the preview notification. Stick to the plan. He quickly flipped the phone over, his movement too swift, too nervous. It's probably other teachers checking in about the search, he said, his voice higher than usual. Aren't you going to answer it? Mrs. Patterson asked, noticing the distraction. It could be important for the search coordination. No, I'm sure it's nothing urgent, he said, turning back to the map. But Marissa noticed his hands were no longer steady as he pointed to various sectors. The unease in Marissa's stomach grew stronger. The personal details he knew, the confusion about the tutoring schedule, the private sessions in restricted areas, and now this cryptic text message. It all seemed to paint a picture that made her deeply uncomfortable. Mr. Chandler, she said slowly, did Adrienne ever mention any specific places in the forest where she liked to hike? Any trails she particularly enjoyed? For just a moment, Mr. Chandler's eyes locked with hers, and she saw something flicker in them. Calculation? Fear? No, he replied, his voice steady but tinged with hesitation. She wasn't much of an outdoors person. She preferred her books. Marissa's heart raced as she listened to Mr. Chandler's confident voice in the driveway, giving last-minute instructions to the search teams. The same voice that had whispered to her daughter about being special, that had lured Adrian into secret meetings with promises and gifts. The words on the pages in Adrienne's planner continued to echo in her mind, each entry more troubling than the last. Unable to ignore the gnawing unease deep in her chest, Marissa slipped away from the growing crowd downstairs and climbed the stairs to Adrienne's room. The door creaked as she opened it, revealing a space that had remained untouched since her daughter's disappearance, frozen in time, a shrine to the girl who was still missing. The bed was perfectly made with the purple comforter Adrienne had picked out for her 16th birthday. Her desk was exactly as it had been that fateful morning in July. Laptop closed, a cup of pencils on the desk, textbooks stacked neatly on the shelf above. Marissa pulled open the desk drawer where Adrienne kept her academic planner. Her daughter had always been meticulous about scheduling, a trait she had inherited from her father. The planner was thick, spiral-bound, filled with Adrienne's neat handwriting in various colored pens. Flipping back to the previous school year, Marissa found September and began searching for any mention of tutoring sessions. In the second week of September, written in blue ink, she found Science Help, Mr. C, 3:30, room 214. It was on a Monday, not the Tuesday or Thursday schedule Mr. Chandler had insisted upon. Her fingers trembled as she continued flipping through the pages. Another entry, 2 weeks later, again on a Monday, then a Wednesday session in early October with a note, canceled. Mr. C has meeting, rescheduled to Friday. The pattern that emerged was nothing like the regular Tuesday-Thursday schedule Mr. Chandler had described. The sessions were scattered, sporadic, and frequently rescheduled at his request. Marissa's eyes skimmed over Adrienne's progress report cards, tucked neatly into the planner's pockets. In September, her biology grade was a solid B, but by October, when these after-school sessions became more frequent, it had jumped to an A. By November, perfect scores across the board. Marissa turned back to the October weekly pages, reading more carefully now. Adrienne had made little notes in purple pen, her favorite color. October 15th. Mr. C says I'm special, different from other students. October 22nd. Earned my A today, Mr. C. So proud. The language made Marissa's stomach turn. Earned? What did that mean? Moving into November, she found more concerning entries. Several lunch periods were marked with science prep room, organizing supplies, but with time notations that didn't make sense. 12:05 to 12:45, when Lakeland High's lunch period was only 30 minutes long. Another entry showed 12:00 to 12:50 with a note, late to English, but Mr. C wrote me a pass. Her hands were shaking now as she reached November 18th. There, in Adrienne's careful script, was an entry that made her blood run cold. Mr. C gave me the pink bracelet for being his best student today. So pretty, he said. Not to show Mom because other kids would be jealous and might say mean things. Our special secret. A pink bracelet Marissa had never seen. She frantically flipped through more pages, finding scattered references to gifts and privileges that seemed inappropriate. December 3rd. Mr. C let me use his personal laptop for research during lunch. He trusts me so much. December 10th. Found our secret study spot today. Mr. C says it's just for his special students. Had to promise not to tell anyone, not even Jess. Jess was Adrienne's best friend. They told each other everything, or at least Marissa had thought they did. The December 15th entry was longer, taking up the entire note section for that day. Mr. C explained why our tutoring is different from what other kids get. He says, I have potential that needs special nurturing away from the mediocre masses. His words, the secret study spot is perfect. No interruptions, no jealous kids watching. He says, by senior year, I'll be so far ahead of everyone else that getting into UW will be easy. Mom will be so proud. Just have to keep our methods private. Mr. C says people wouldn't understand how special our connection is. Marissa's legs gave out, and she sank onto Adrienne's bed, the planner clutched tightly in her trembling hands. The language, the secrecy, the gifts, the isolated meetings, it all painted a picture of grooming that made her physically ill. How had she missed this? How had the school missed this? Through the window, she could hear car doors slamming as the search teams prepared to leave. Mr. Chandler's voice carried up from the driveway, authoritative and confident as he gave last-minute instructions to his team. The same voice that had whispered to her daughter about being special, that had lured Adrienne into secret meetings with gifts and promises. Marissa's mind raced. Should she call Detective Holbrook? But what if she was wrong? What if she was just a paranoid mother reading too much into innocent teacher-student interactions? The entries were concerning, but not explicitly criminal. And if she was right, if Mr. Chandler had been grooming Adrienne, what did that mean for her disappearance? The sound of engines starting below brought a sense of urgency to Marissa. The search teams were about to head out, including Mr. Chandler's team, which was heading to the eastern quadrant, the area he had specifically steered her away from. Her mind made up. She tucked Adrienne's planner into her jacket and hurried downstairs. The search teams were loading into their vehicles, volunteers checking equipment and confirming radio frequencies. She spotted Team A gathering near Coach Rodriguez's SUV, but her eyes were fixed on Mr. Chandler as he walked toward his silver Honda Accord. Mrs. Ewing, we're about ready to head out, called Mrs. Patterson from Team A. I'll be right there, Marissa replied, moving toward her own car. Just need to grab something from my vehicle. She slipped into her Toyota Camry, started the engine, and watched through her rearview mirror as Mr. Chandler's Honda pulled out of her driveway. Team C was supposed to head northeast toward the forest, near Bunko Road, where Buddy had been found. But as Marissa eased onto the street, maintaining a careful distance, she watched Mr. Chandler turn south onto Highway 95, the complete opposite direction. Her hands tightened on the steering wheel. Where was he going? She followed at a distance, keeping at least 2 cars between them when possible. The Sunday afternoon traffic was light enough that she could track his silver Honda without getting too close. About 3 miles down Highway 95, Mr. Chandler suddenly pulled into a gas station. Marissa's heart pounded as she drove past, not daring to stop. In her side mirror, she saw him get out of his car and look around the parking lot, his posture tense and watchful. She pulled into a McDonald's parking lot a 1/4 mile down and waited, watching the road. 5 minutes later, his Honda reappeared, continuing south. This time, Marissa let 3 cars get between them before pulling back onto the highway. They drove for another 2 miles before Mr. Chandler made another unexpected stop, this time at a seemingly abandoned fruit stand on the side of the road. He didn't get out, just sat there for a full minute. Marissa pulled off onto a side road, partially hidden behind a cluster of pine trees, and watched him through her binoculars, a pair she'd bought for Adrian's brief interest in bird watching. Mr. Chandler was checking his mirrors repeatedly, his head swiveling left and right. He was looking for someone, looking for her. After another minute, he pulled back onto the highway. Marissa's mouth was dry as she continued following him. He turned west onto Rimrock Road, a winding 2-lane road that led toward the older residential areas on the outskirts of town. She knew this area well. It was where many of the original settler homes still stood, craftsman-style houses from the early 1900s scattered among newer developments. She had to fall back further now, the lighter traffic making her car more conspicuous. The Honda disappeared around curves and reappeared on straightaways, leading her deeper into the rural landscape. After about 4 miles, she saw his turn signal flash as he pulled into a gravel driveway. Marissa drove past without slowing, catching a glimpse of an old craftsman house set back from the road, partially hidden by overgrown rhododendrons. She continued for another 1/4 mile before finding a place to turn around, then parked on the shoulder behind a stand of Douglas firs. Her phone still had decent signal out here. With trembling fingers, she searched the address she'd glimpsed on the mailbox, 4847 Rimrock Road. The county assessor's website loaded slowly, but finally, the property information appeared. Owner: estate of Eleanor Chandler. Date of death: November 2019. Beneficiary: Tobias Chandler. Her heart hammered. She refined her search, finding Eleanor Chandler's obituary. A retired schoolteacher, she had been preceded in death by her husband, William, and survived by her grandson, Tobias. The property had been in the Chandler family since 1947. A quick search on Zillow showed more disturbing information. The house had been listed as a rental property in March 2020, just months after Eleanor's death. Charming 3-bedroom craftsman on 2 acres, perfect for someone seeking rural tranquility. But the listing status had changed to temporarily off-market on June 15, 2023. Marissa did the math quickly. Adrian had disappeared on July 8, 2023, less than a month after Mr. Chandler had pulled his grandmother's house off the rental market. She crept back toward the property on foot, staying in the tree line. From her hidden vantage point, she could see the house more clearly. It appeared well maintained, the yard mowed, the paint fresh, but newspapers were accumulated on the front porch, a small pile that suggested about a week's worth, as if someone was maintaining the property but not actually living there full time. Fresh tire tracks in the gravel driveway caught her attention, not just from Mr. Chandler's Honda, which was now parked near the detached garage, but another set of tracks, slightly older but still recent, leading to the back of the property. The house looked empty despite Mr. Chandler's presence. No lights on, despite the cloudy afternoon, and no movement in the windows. But he had entered with a key, confidently, like someone who came here regularly. Marissa's heart pounded as she crouched behind the thick cluster of huckleberry bushes, her phone in her hand. Detective Holbrook's number was on the screen, and her thumb hovered over the call button. What could she say? That she had followed a teacher to his grandmother's house instead of joining the search? That her suspicions were based on some planner entries and the fact that he had driven in the opposite direction from where he was supposed to be? She could already imagine the detective's response. Did you see anything criminal? Do you have evidence of a crime? What did she have, really? A teacher at a house he legally owned? Concerning but vague diary entries, a bad feeling in her gut? She needed more before making that call. If she was wrong, if this was all just paranoid delusion brought on by grief and the shock of finding Buddy alive, she would embarrass herself and potentially derail the search efforts. And if she was right, if Mr. Chandler was hiding something, she couldn't risk him being alerted and potentially harming Adrian. Marissa backed away from her hiding spot and made her way to her car. She drove back down Rimrock Road, looking for a better vantage point. About a quarter-mile from the Chandler property, she spotted an abandoned barn, its red paint peeling and roof partially collapsed. A rutted dirt path led behind it. Perfect. She parked her Camry behind the barn, hidden from the road, and began making her way back toward the house on foot. The forest here was thick, with Douglas firs and cedars creating a natural screen. She moved carefully, avoiding dry branches and grateful for the soft forest floor dampened by recent rain. The back of the Chandler property came into view through the trees. From this angle, she could see details she'd missed from the front. The basement level of the house was more visible, where the ground sloped away. Most of the basement windows had been replaced with glass blocks, the thick, opaque kind that let in light but prevented anyone from seeing in or out. It was an unusual modification for a rental property, but there was one small window that hadn't been fully blocked, a ventilation window, maybe 8 inches high and 2 feet wide, still glassed but with what looked like curtains hanging inside. Fresh concrete patches around the foundation caught her eye. Someone had recently worked here, sealing gaps or perhaps reinforcing the foundation. The concrete looked a few months old, its color still lighter than the original foundation. Marissa crept closer, using the overgrown rhododendrons as cover. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure it could be heard from the house. When she reached the ventilation window, she had to crouch low, the window only about a foot above ground level. There was a small gap where the curtains didn't quite meet. She pressed her face close to the glass, cupping her hands around her eyes to block out the afternoon light. What she saw made her blood freeze. It was unmistakably a classroom setup. A whiteboard on the far wall covered in writing, a desk with textbooks stacked neatly on its surface, and hanging on the back of the desk chair, Adrienne's purple backpack. The one with the small rip on the front pocket that she had patched with a smiley face iron-on. The one Adrienne had taken with her on that last morning walk because she had planned to stop at the library after. Marissa's vision blurred with tears, but she forced herself to focus, to catalog everything she could see. The textbooks were definitely from Lakeland High. She recognized the AP biology text, the same edition Adrienne used. The whiteboard was covered in notes about cellular respiration, and the handwriting was unmistakably Mr. Chandler's, precise, like the writing on Adrienne's returned assignments. The room looked lived in. There was a small refrigerator in one corner, a microwave on top of it, and a narrow bed against the stone wall. Those were definitely old stone walls, suggesting this had once been a root cellar. A door must have led to a bathroom, based on the PVC pipe she could see running along the ceiling. Movement in her peripheral vision made her freeze. Mr. Chandler descended what must have been stairs outside her field of view, carrying a tray. Marissa could see sandwiches, a glass of milk, and an apple cut into slices, the way Adrienne always liked them. He moved out of view toward the area under the stairs where she couldn't see, but she could hear his voice, muffled through the glass but still audible. "I brought lunch. Turkey and Swiss, your favorite." There was a response, a young female voice, too quiet to make out the words. "Your mom still hasn't figured it out. Mr. Chandler continued, his voice taking on that same confidential tone she'd heard at her kitchen table. But we need to be more careful now that they've found the dog. Another response, longer this time. The tone wasn't panicked or pleading. It sounded resigned, weary, like someone having a conversation they'd had many times before. "I know you miss him," Mr. Chandler said, his voice softening. "But it was necessary. We couldn't have him leading them here too soon. You understand that, don't you? Everything I do is to protect you, to protect what we're building together." The female voice again, and this time, Marissa caught a few words carried on the draft from the ventilation window. "Mom won't. The assignments." Marissa's breath caught in her throat. This was no longer just a feeling. It was something far darker than she had imagined. Marissa's pulse raced, her hand trembling as she pressed the phone closer to her ear. "Mr." Chandler's voice had carried through the air, a twisted distortion of his usual calm composure, and the realization struck her like a slap. Her daughter was alive, but trapped in a nightmare. "I need to call for help now." She could hear the dispatcher's calm voice, so surreal against the frantic pounding of her heart. 911, what's your emergency?" "This is Marissa Ewing," she whispered urgently, trying to steady herself. "My daughter Adrienne has been missing for a year. I'm at 4847 Rimrock Road, and I can see her. She's being held in the basement by her teacher, Tobias Chandler." The dispatcher's voice shifted, growing sharper. "Ma'am, I need you to speak up. Did you say you can see your missing daughter?" "Yes, she's in the basement. I saw her backpack, heard him talking to her. It's 4847 Rimrock." Marissa's voice cracked as she spelled out the address, her breath coming fast, heart thundering in her chest. But then, crack, a sharp noise from beneath her feet. Her eyes flew down to see the shattered remains of a decorative solar light. Horror froze her in place, and then she heard it. The back door of the Chandler house slammed open with force, the sound of it echoing through the yard. Mr. Chandler stood in the doorway, his face twisted in fury, his voice a roar. "I know you're there!" he shouted, his eyes sweeping the yard. "Marissa, you followed me. You couldn't just trust me to search for her, could you?" Marissa's blood ran cold, and without thinking, she ran, her phone still pressed to her ear. "Rimrock Road, 4847, send help now!" she screamed, hearing the dispatcher's voice become frantic, asking for her location. But her foot caught on a root, and she tumbled to the ground, the phone flying from her hand. Panic surged through her. She scrambled to grab it, but Mr. Chandler was already there, snatching it up and hurling it against the brick siding of the house. The phone exploded into pieces. "You don't understand," he shouted, as Marissa regained her feet and started running. "You never understood what Adrienne really needs. The pressure you put on her, the mediocre education at that school. I'm protecting her from a world that doesn't appreciate gifted students like her." Marissa's heart pounded as she crashed through the underbrush, her clothes tearing, skin stinging from the branches. She could hear him behind her, his hiking boots crushing the forest debris with terrifying precision. Her car, she had to reach her car. The desperate thought fueled her legs as they burned with every step. He was getting closer now, his voice like a steady drumbeat, louder with each passing second, drowning in busy work and standardized tests when she could be truly learning. "I gave her what you couldn't, individual attention, real education, a chance to reach her full potential." Through the trees, the abandoned barn came into view. Marissa pushed herself harder, every muscle screaming in protest. The barn was just ahead, and her car, her Camry, was barely 50 feet away. She yanked open the door and flung herself inside, slamming the locks just as Mr. Chandler reached the vehicle. His fists hammered against the window, his words distorted with fury. "She wants to be here. She's thriving. You'll destroy everything we've built." Marissa slammed the engine into reverse, gravel spraying as she backed away from him. In the rearview mirror, she saw him sprinting toward his Honda. Tires screamed as she spun the wheel, tearing out of the gravel driveway and onto the road. She had to lose him. She had to. Her mind raced as fast as her car. The dispatcher had the address. She'd said it twice. That has to be enough. The search teams were on their way. They had to be. She raced through the quiet streets, trying to shake him off. Rimrock Road stretched ahead, winding through the countryside. In her mirrors, the silver Honda was still hot on her tail, Mr. Chandler driving with the same terrifying intensity he'd shown when chasing her in the yard. At the intersection with Cedar Lane, she took a sharp right, tires screaming in protest. He was right behind her, cutting off a pickup truck to stay on her tail. Marissa weaved between cars as they neared a residential neighborhood, running stop signs and praying no children were playing in the streets. Left on Maple, right on 3rd, then another left onto Pine. He stayed with her, turning as if he knew these roads too. Her heart raced as she approached Highway 95, merging into traffic without a glance. Horns blared around her, and the Honda followed, but the heavier traffic worked in her favor. The silver Honda got stuck behind a slow-moving RV. By the time Marissa reached the Walmart intersection, she had lost sight of him. She pulled into the parking lot, quickly finding the far corner, and parked her Camry. She sat there, breathing hard, every muscle aching, her mind spinning. She hadn't been followed. She'd gotten away, but the real fight was just beginning. Marissa's heart was pounding in her chest as she crouched behind the huckleberry bushes, phone trembling in her hand. She had made her decision. She had to call for help. But what would she say? That she had followed a teacher to his grandmother's house instead of joining the search for her daughter? That she had a feeling something was terribly wrong, based on some planner entries and the fact that he'd driven in the opposite direction from where he was supposed to be? What would Detective Holbrook ask her? Did you see anything criminal? Do you have evidence of a crime? What did she have? Really? It was just a teacher at a house he legally owned, concerning but vague diary entries, and an overwhelming gut feeling that something wasn't right. Marissa needed more before she could make the call. If she was wrong, if this was just a paranoid delusion from the grief and shock of finding Buddy alive, she'd not only embarrass herself, but risk derailing the search. And if she was right, if something dark was happening, she couldn't risk alerting Mr. Chandler and putting Adrienne in even more danger. With a final, shaky breath, Marissa backed away from her hiding spot and made her way to her car. She drove back down Rimrock Road, searching for a better vantage point. About a quarter mile from Chandler's property, she spotted an abandoned barn with peeling red paint and a collapsed roof. A rutted dirt path led behind it. Perfect. She parked her car behind the barn, hidden from the road, and started making her way back toward the house on foot. The forest was thick with Douglas firs and cedars, providing natural cover. She moved carefully, grateful for the soft, damp forest floor. As she neared the back of the Chandler property, the house became more visible. She could now see the basement level clearly, where the ground sloped away. Most of the basement windows had been replaced with glass blocks, opaque, allowing light in but preventing anyone from seeing out. It was an unusual modification for a rental property. But there was one small window that hadn't been fully blocked, a ventilation window, about 8 inches high and 2 feet wide, still glassed, but with what looked like curtains hanging inside. Marissa's heart skipped a beat. Fresh concrete patches around the foundation caught her attention. The concrete looked new, a few months old, lighter than the original foundation. She crept closer, using the overgrown rhododendrons as cover. Her heart was pounding in her chest, but she had to get closer. When she reached the ventilation window, she crouched low, the window only about a foot above the ground. There was a small gap where the curtains didn't meet. She pressed her face close to the glass, cupping her hands around her eyes to block out the afternoon light. What she saw made her blood run cold. The room inside was unmistakably a classroom setup. A whiteboard covered in writing, a desk with textbooks neatly stacked, and hanging on the back of the chair, Adrienne's purple backpack. The same one she'd carried on her last morning walk, the one with the small rip in the front pocket that Adrienne had patched with a smiley face iron-on. Marissa's vision blurred with tears, but she forced herself to focus. The textbooks were from Lakeland High. She recognized the AP Biology text, the same edition Adrienne used. The whiteboard had notes on cellular respiration, and the handwriting on it was unmistakably Mr. Chandler's, precise, just like the writing on Adrienne's returned assignments. The room looked lived in. There was a small refrigerator in one corner, a microwave on top of it, and a narrow bed against the stone wall. Marissa recognized the old stone walls, likely a root cellar converted into this disturbing classroom prison. A door led to what appeared to be a bathroom, based on the PVC pipe running along the ceiling. Marissa froze as movement caught her peripheral vision. Mr. Chandler was descending a set of stairs outside her view, carrying a tray. On it, sandwiches, a glass of milk, and an apple, sliced exactly the way Adrienne had always liked them. He moved out of her line of sight toward the area under the stairs, but she could hear him clearly through the thin curtains. "I brought lunch, turkey and Swiss, your favorite," he called. A young female voice, too quiet to fully make out, responded. "Your mom still hasn't figured it out," Mr. Chandler continued, his tone conspiratorial. "But we need to be more careful now that they found the dog." Another response followed, longer this time. Marissa could hear the resignation in the voice, as if it had heard this conversation many times before. "I know you miss him," Mr. Chandler said softly, "but it was necessary. We couldn't have him leading them here too soon. You understand that, don't you? Everything I do is to protect you, to protect what we're building together." The female voice spoke again, and this time, Marissa caught a few words. "Mom won't... the assignments." Marissa's heart sank, her blood turning cold as the true horror of the situation became clear. It was no longer just a teacher who had gotten too close. This was manipulation, control, and now a life trapped. Marissa's whole body was trembling, her hands shaking uncontrollably as she clutched the phone, listening to Tobias Chandler's confession through the speaker. His calm, detached words twisted her insides, making her feel sick. The sheer audacity, the manipulation, everything he had done to her daughter under the guise of education was horrifying. Everything we'd worked for would be destroyed by a move, Chandler had said with disturbing pride. Her progress, her future, being taken from me would expose her to inferior teachers who wouldn't understand her needs. He continued, describing the modifications to his grandmother's house: soundproofing, a ventilation system, a chemical toilet, and the disguise of a rental studio. Each word made Marissa's stomach twist. "When she disappeared," Chandler explained, "I knew her routine. Saturday morning walks with the dog on the Centennial Trail, always the same route, same time. I intercepted her near the bridge where the trail is isolated. The chloroform was from old chemistry supplies the school was supposed to have destroyed years ago. She didn't suffer when she woke up. She was safe in her new classroom. And the dog, necessary misdirection. I'd scouted that location in the forest weeks before, remote enough that he wouldn't be found immediately, but eventually someone would discover him. It would focus the search far from the house. I went back periodically to feed him, keep him alive. A dead dog would end the search. A living dog would extend it, keep hope alive while directing resources away from the truth. The words felt like ice in her veins, and she stumbled back, clutching her phone tightly. Her body felt hollow as the weight of what she had just heard sank in. 2 floors up, Dr. Patricia Vance, a forensic interviewer, sat with Adrienne in a room designed to feel less clinical than the rest of the hospital. Marissa could only watch through the one-way glass, her heart breaking as she heard her daughter's flat, emotionless voice through the speakers. Mr. C explained everything that first day, Adrienne said, her eyes fixed on her hands, her voice detached. He said Mom was relieved I was gone, that now she could date without worrying about setting a bad example, could save money instead of paying for college. He showed me a news article on his phone about runaways, said that's how I'd been classified. Not missing, just another teenage runaway. How did that make you feel? Dr. Vance asked gently. Hurt at first, but then grateful, Adrienne replied. Mr. C said he was the only one who truly cared about my education, my future. He risked everything to give me individual attention to prepare me for college without the distractions and inferior teaching at regular school. She described her daily routine with chilling normality. Wake up at 6:15 a.m. Breakfast, usually cereal, or toast that he'd bring down. Mathematics from 7 to 9, science until lunch. Afternoon for history and English. Evening for test prep and college essays. He'd grade everything, giving detailed feedback. Praise for perfection, disappointment for anything less. He gave me rewards for good performance. Rewards? Dr. Vance asked. The pink bracelet when I maintained straight A's for a month. New books when I exceeded expectations. Extra food variety for perfect test scores. Screen time on his laptop for exceptional essays. Always supervised, of course. Did you ever try to leave? Dr. Vance asked gently. Adrienne looked confused by the question. Where would I go? I was a runaway. Mom didn't want me back. I'd missed so much school. I'd never catch up. Mr. C was preparing me for success out there. She gestured vaguely. I'd just be another failure. Dr. Helena Morrison, the trauma specialist, explained to Marissa that Adrienne had developed severe Stockholm Syndrome, a year of isolation, combined with Mr. Chandler's psychological manipulation, had fundamentally altered her perception of reality. She genuinely believed he was protecting her. She feared the outside world would reject her. When Marissa was finally allowed into the room, she saw Adrienne sitting there, looking both impossibly young and far too old for her years. Her daughter's eyes met hers, unsure. Mom? Adrienne's voice was soft, almost uncertain, as if she weren't sure this was real. Oh, baby, Marissa sobbed, pulling her daughter into her arms. I never stopped looking, not for one day. I love you so much. Adrienne was stiff at first, her body rigid in shock, but slowly, like ice beginning to melt, she softened into her mother's embrace. He said you were glad, Adrienne whispered, that I was too much trouble, too expensive. Never, Marissa said fiercely. You are my whole world. Everything I did was to find you, to bring you home. Detective Holbrook entered quietly, nodding to Dr. Vance. We found everything, he said softly. The pink bracelet, the completed assignments, the college essay she wrote about why she was taking a gap year for independent study. The manipulation was comprehensive. Adrienne pulled back slightly from her mother, anxiety creeping into her features. My assignments? Did you save them all? All that work? I need them for my transcripts. Her voice grew smaller, more frightened. Am I still going to get into college even though I missed a year of real school? Mr. C said the homeschool curriculum was better, but what if colleges don't accept it? What if I ruined everything? Marissa held her daughter tighter, feeling the fragile bones beneath her hands, understanding that the physical rescue was only the beginning. Adrienne's perception of herself was shattered, her worth tied to academic achievement, to perfect grades, her entire identity wrapped up in the prison Mr. Chandler had built around her. We'll figure it out together, Marissa whispered, stroking Adrienne's lank hair. Whatever you need, however long it takes, you're safe now. That's all that matters. But even as she said it, Marissa could feel her daughter's tension, the fear that safety might not be enough if it came without the perfect GPA that had become her entire identity in that basement prison.